And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL in our Footy Insight episode. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special guest, a very unique opportunity. I've talked with coaches, I've talked with players, I've talked with supporters. There's only one part of footy that I have not talked with, and I have the great luxury of knowing a very good friend out of SA in Steph Simmonds, whose sister is an umpire with the AFLW. So joining us today from the umpire's perspective is Gabby Simmonds. Gabby, thank you for joining me today.
No worries, Donny. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I must say this is quite the honor. I know that I've talked with players and coaches, but I'm really interested to hear kind of the story from the umpire's point of view. I think you're kind of the one that takes the most wrath, but the one that I, as a coach, maybe a little bit up here, I have a lot of respect for what you do because it is not an easy job. So before we jump into the footy, let's go just a little bit. I like finding out a little bit about the person other than the footy. So just real quickly about yourself personally outside of the game of footy.
Yeah, so I'm based in WA in Australia, and I am a PE teacher. So I teach sport. Um, Also enjoy my surfing, and just like love watching sport and listening to sport and playing sport. So a bit of a sport nuffy, but yeah, teaching and umpiring takes up a lot of my life at the moment for sure.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. So already, again, growing up in WA, footy mad, I must ask your favorite part about the sport of football.
I think it's just the contest and you know the atmosphere that's built by bringing like these two teams together. It's something that obviously people get really passionate about, and seeing how passionate people get, and how it can make or ruin people's weekends is it's a great part of sport, but it's a great part of footy, and just the contest that it brings every week is something that obviously is excites me, and I think is what brings crowds in every week. So that's the big one for me.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let's go back into the time machine a little bit. What is your earliest footy memory?
Um, Personally, my personal memory would be just playing footy in the backyard with my old man and with Steph, who you mentioned earlier. Yeah, kicking a ball around constantly, making sure we're always busy. So, um, no, that's probably my earliest memory. But we have a few family videos from back in the day, and in most of them, there's a bit of footy playing on the on the wireless in the background. So that's pretty early memory as well. Definitely brought up. If we didn't like footy, we would have been in strife, I reckon, with the old man. So
I love
yeah,
it. Absolutely love it. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. As somebody that got into it later in a country, unfortunately, that does not have it, I would have I would have cherished that opportunity to have that in such the early days of my life. So you kind of said it. Did you ever play organized footy growing up? And if so, what position did you play?
yeah. So I played like the real junior stuff, the Oz kick stuff when you're pre-primary, and then Mum decided that got a bit rough, so I had to take about 10 years off. But then I went back and played women's when I was 15 years old. Was lucky enough to play for a couple of state teams in the few years that I did play. But I was definitely a winger. So staying true to mum's word, I played on the outside away from too much of the roughness of the game. And I could run. So that was the spot for me for sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a good old fashioned winger. Trust me, I love wing play. I'm one of those that I thoroughly enjoy watching it. So that's the position that I love. Absolutely fantastic. Already being in WA, I never assume. Was there a club that you barracked for in the AFL or Waffle growing up?
Well, I played for East Freo, so obviously I had a little soft spot for them. But when it came to AFL, I think I just enjoyed footy. I had about 7 teams that I supported. Um, Dad wasn't too impressed with it, but definitely had a few teams that I varied for, which I think ended up just meaning that I enjoyed the footy, and even now you can just enjoy the players and the athletes that are out there and what the game is, based on its merits rather than backing a team in and being so disappointed at the end of it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Just enjoying the good old fashioned footy. I must say, until the Swans women's side, when I was watching the AFLW, everyone asked me, "Did you pick a second team because you didn't have the Swans?" I went, "No." I said, "I was just enjoying the footy. I was thoroughly enjoying it."
Yeah.
When the Swans came in, that changed drastically. I won't lie at all. I became a nuffy just as much for the women as I did for the men, but I still thoroughly enjoy watching the game and enjoying it, no matter if my team's playing or not. So it's also the reason why I started doing the state league coverage, because I can kind of be that neutral and enjoy the game there. So you said you kind of were an East Frio fan. Can you remember the first ever East Frio item you were given or bought?
Um, oh, it's probably just a footy that they gave out at the end of the games. With the state league, you can go out onto the field and you can get signatures from players and that sort of thing. So definitely cherish my little East Freo footy and get all the signatures of players that you didn't really know who they were, but they're a big man, and it was a bit
Mhm.
exciting for you.
Fantastic. Alrighty. So we'll go to it. You're an umpire, as we've kind of already established. How is it that you went from playing footy, just being a sport nothing, to how did the journey start to get into umpiring?
Yeah, so I was watching a game actually at East Freo Oval with Dad, and I just said to him, "Oh, I reckon I can do a better job than these blokes out here umpiring." So Dad got on the phone that weekend, and by Wednesday I was down at my first training session with the East Freo junior umpires. And by the next Saturday, I was umpiring my first year three game, so under 10s game. Knees shaking, absolutely scared shitless, but yeah, it was better for the run, and I haven't looked back since.
There's nothing wrong with that. You gotta start somewhere. So tell me, how long a journey did it take you to get to the point where you are field umpiring AFLW games?
Yeah, so I've been umpiring for 15 years now, so it's been a large portion of my life. It's over half my life now. So Um, yeah, just went through the ranks. I obviously made some good decisions at junior level, and got earmarked with a bit of talent. So um, went through a few of the programs that in WA, going from PSA, which is our um, private school, boys' schools. They have their own competition, so you'd umpire those, and then you get into the waffle competition. That took me about 5 or 6 years to crack into that. Um, and then I've been umpiring AFLW since its inception. So that's been pretty exciting.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. So is there any thought process, and I know this is a little bit of questions without notice here. Is there any thought process of eventually trying to get into the AFL and actually umpiring an AFL game?
Oh, that was the dream when I was on that hill as a 13-year-old, I think. You realize there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So that's all I can do is keep putting good performances up, and the dream's still there, but you're aware of there's not many guys retiring, and there's not a lot of spots there. So
Mhm.
you got to be the best of the best to get there, and the dream's there, but a lot of hard work still to put in to get there.
Well, we'll cross our fingers. Hopefully, maybe one day we will see you. We will see you donning and being on the field for an AFL, especially now that they're doing four umpires. So there's the
Yeah.
possibility. So, alrighty, I'll go here. What's your favorite part about being an umpire?
It's a bit cliche, but you have a front row seat of the game. Um, you get some massive games, and you're right in the thick of it. You're right in a part of it. You're riding the emotions almost just as much as the players sometimes, with the boos of the crowd and the, the shouts of the crowd. So it's just really exciting. Um, yeah, just to be amongst it all is, yeah, a pretty good feeling. So that's what keeps me involved for sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. All right, and I'll go to this. I tend to keep negative as little as possible. What's the worst part?
It's easy to go to the abuse, but I've been pretty lucky in terms of abuse for me. I haven't copped too much. I mean, AFLW, it's a different crowd, and you get cheered onto the ground sometimes. So that's always a nice little change up. But um, I think the hardest part is actually junior umpiring and the parents and stuff on the sidelines,
Mm.
more so than the big crowds, because you don't really hear it too much. It all just meshes into one. Where at junior footy, you hear the parents quite vocal sometimes, so that's probably the hardest bit.
It's the one thing is I've coached in year sevens over here in basketball, and sometimes even I would get on the parents on the sidelines like, hey, these are 20, 25-year-old kids just trying to make a buck. Let them do their job. I know it's not easy, but you just let them call the game. It may not be exactly the way you want it, so it is rather frustrating. So I feel you on that one, definitely for sure. So we'll go from the negative. We'll go back to the positive. Have you ever had a funny interaction with a player or coach, like a funny story that you can tell us?
Um, well, they're not meant to do this, but I was umpiring in the waffle in the reserves competition, and there was a bit of a fight happening, a bit of a melee, and I've just all of a sudden I've found myself quite close to it. As umpires, we obviously just try to stay pretty vocal and tell them to calm down and tell other people not to join in. But sometimes we get sucked in and get a bit close, or it moves towards us. And one of these players just, I think, saw how close I'd gotten, and he's just picked me up by my shoulders and moved me away from it. Um, which they're definitely not meant to do, but I ended up being like, "Yep, thanks, mate. Please
Mhm.
don't join the fight."
That is awesome. I love it.
Yeah,
At least there's a respect factor there that he moved you out. So that is
yeah.
fantastic. I love that. So all right, the next one this is a little bit of me in this one is because I do some umpiring for us with my guys that I coach up here because to be able to play games sometimes we got to have an umpire. So for me there's a few calls that I absolutely love. Holding the ball, holding without the man, different ones. Do you have a favorite call that you like calling that you really get into? Like, do you really get into a holding the ball call? What's your go-to call that you love doing?
Um, the holding the ball is obviously a good one. It's quite a unique
Hmm.
movement. But I think for me, it's the wind up when there's an insufficient intent or a deliberate.
Hmm.
Just the wind up with the big swish through. Because everyone knows as soon as you start sort of sprinting in that you're going to pay it, and you just get that momentum and swing through.
No, there's nothing. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. So I wanted to see. It was always one of those. I find myself fully getting into holding the ball when I do call. So it's had to ask that one personally. So okay, one of those. I like doing this because I think it needs to be pushed more to really help young men and women that maybe don't want to play but still want to be part of it to become umpires. So what would you say is your best piece of advice for a young boy or young girl who wants to become an umpire?
Um, have fun. I think that's the most important thing. I think be responsible for where you want to end up. So, if you want to just do juniors and make some money, easy. If you want to go further and be umpiring waffle, AFL, AFLW, be responsible for where you end up. So be willing to work hard. Make sure you get good people around you. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure you have fun. And I think if you do all of those things, you will have fun. Because the games can get pretty lonely out there when it's a tight game and there's crowd from both sides having a go at you and abusing you. So if you're not out there having fun with two people that you trust, then it's going to be a really tough day at the office. So it's a mindset I definitely try to go into every game with. Just try and have some fun and relax. Um, let the crowd be the ones that are amped up. Let the players be the ones that are amped up. You be the calm one, and just enjoy it.
Awesome, awesome. All right. So I'm gonna have a little fun with this. I When I found out that you were gonna come on, I decided I wanted to find out if there were any supporter questions to ask of an AFLW umpire. And I had a few reach out and I made sure to tell them that I would like them to be respectful. And many of them were. So I've got a few questions for you here that I just would love to hear your answer. So we'll start off with a friend of mine who is a huge Brisbane Lions supporter, Lori, and now I have to be sure where I'm at in my thing. There we go. Okay. What does your typical week look like in season and preseason? And what fitness work do you need to do to be sure that you're at your best?
Yeah, so my season obviously finished last weekend, but my preseason starts tomorrow. So I've had a week off, but at this point, it's just 3 or 4 long runs a week, a day of longer intervals. So there is a bit of that interval stuff. And then you put in a couple of sessions of mobility and strength in there as well. That's probably for the first like 4 weeks or so. As we get close, like just after Christmas, we'll add a bit more of the tempo stuff and higher intensity stuff. We go back as a group, I guess. For the waffle, we train twice a week as a group. So for us, we get together twice a week. Um, Late January, early February, that sort of starts. Again, higher intensity but higher volume, I guess, on the Tuesdays, and then the Thursdays, we end up a shorter session, more agility stuff with those game-like movements that we have to do throughout the game. And then obviously once the season rolls around, we have a game on a Saturday, so it all comes together then.
Awesome, awesome, love it, absolutely. So I'm interested on this next one. I think is interesting. Are there subtle allowances slash differences between how tightly called the game is for men versus the women, i.e., the holding the ball discussion that I think a lot of people are talking about?
Yeah, not necessarily. If anything, I think we're a bit tighter on the women. Um, I guess the interpretation is slightly different, but not overly. We just, I guess, for us and for viewers, we want to have as few stoppages as we possibly can. So if the ball's moving, there's going to be more scores, and that's what we want for the women's game. So we might be a bit hotter on the holding balls, I think, at times compared to men's. But overall, there isn't really a general like, oh no, we got to be really hot on this. It's
Mhm,
just this is what the game wants, so we'll interpret it slightly differently. I guess yeah. Also, you have the last disposal in there as well, so um, that changes our whole I guess approach to insufficient intent and that sort of thing as well, because
mhm,
you have that there between the arcs. So you do have slight like interpretations that are slightly different, but overall, it's generally we're umpiring the same footy.
mhm. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that on that one. I love this. The last one that she sent, and I think this is great because you do umpire waffle. Who is more lippier on the field to the umpires, males or female players?
Look, I think for me, the boys are pretty good at keeping their keeping quiet, but the girls can get a bit lippy for sure. I think also a lot of the men's sides, they've obviously been playing for a bit longer, and um, you know, I guess in both competitions, you don't really want to be giving away 50 meters for abuse and that sort of thing. But yeah, the girls can get a bit lippy sometimes. It's just calm down. This is what I saw. This is why I played it. Where I think the boys, because obviously it's happened for a long time, particularly at the elite level, it just said it's not worth it. It's costing
Mhm,
your team more. So, but that's definitely got better over the last 6 years in women's as well. I
mhm.
definitely remember season one. There was plenty of chirping going on. So.
I can only imagine. This is a fun one. My friend Polly, who's also a huge Swan fan, wants to know is what type of relationship do you have with some of the players in say the AFLW? Is it again to the point now where they recognize you and you kind of know who's some of the people that you've had before, or is it one of those that each time it's kind of just the respect factor? So what kind of relationship do you have with many of the players?
Yeah, so definitely our umpiring department is really in AFL and AFLW really try to build that rapport with players. So during pre-seasons, a lot of umpires will go out and do club visits. So during match sim, they'll get a few umpires out to just help them out. Um, so to make sure they're umpiring and ready for those decisions and the interpretations going into the season. So that offers us a really good opportunity to build some relationships with players. Um, I'm lucky enough with women's. I've actually played state footy with quite a few of them, particularly the West Australian teams. So I obviously have those relationships standing with a few of those girls. And all it takes is a bit of a chat pre-game, and you say, "Hey, how you going?" And they do start to recognise you and have a few chats like that. So when it's not all serious at that point of time, it's good that we can try to build those relationships. So when it gets to in a game, you can speak to them a bit more like human beings sometimes rather than a uniform.
Mm-hmm. No, makes complete and utter sense. So I'm interested on this because again, as I've kind of heard discussed that the AFLW umpires is kind of building up to potentially being AFL. So how do you review footage in previous weeks and walk through new rulings being applied in preseason? E.g., how do they first understand like the stand rule that was recently introduced?
Yeah, so for us, so our umpiring department, they went out to every club and just went through the new set of rules. They say this is how we're going to interpret it. We then have our own coaching sessions on that. And then obviously, as I just said, like we'll go out to clubs during pre-season so they get to practice how we're going to interpret that as well. So that'll happen every pre-season. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we had like 11 new rules come in. So I think there were several education sessions with the umpiring department and the football departments of each club, and the players, so they can sit there and they can ask questions, which I think is really important for their own understanding and that sort of thing. So, um, yeah, I think altogether you hope that that puts them in a good stead going into round one each year.
Awesome, awesome. So this next one you kind of already answered, but I'm interested to see how you would interpret this. My friend asked, I would like to know, are the umpires more lenient on the girls now that their competition has been more established for some time now?
No, we umpire it as we see it, as we're told to do. So if there's a throw, it's a throw. If they've had prior opportunity, they've had prior opportunity. You got to get rid of it. So I it's not something we definitely do on purpose. If people do perceive that, but nah, it's interpreted exactly the same for us.
Hmm. No, I completely understand. Again, it's the other thing that I try to tell friends of mine sometimes while watching is you got to remember is that there's a completely different angle that sometimes the umpire can't see. So sometimes we're screaming, holding the ball when what you're seeing in the pack is not exactly what we're seeing from a camera 50, 70 meters away. So I
Yeah,
kind of one of those, I tend to be I and I'll say this, I've said this many times. I don't go to the umpires many times because I think it's a cop out personally. And this just me personally. I think blaming an umpire for why a call doesn't go your way is a cop out a little bit because you're putting something else than maybe the player not doing what they're supposed to. So again, reel it in myself. All right. And then my last of my supporter questions from my friend Zane here is would you like to have a few crossovers of some of the top males, the top men's umpires come down and help you a little bit with the AFLW just to kind of give that experience level to people in the AFLW?
yeah. They've actually done that the last 3 years. So, I got to umpire with Simon Meredith, who's a grand final umpire. I've got to umpire with Ray Chamberlain, who's most people, if they know umpires, they know Ray Chamberlain.
Hmm.
I got up to umpire the first game of the season with him this year. So we're definitely getting those opportunities to umpire with those guys. And to umpire with someone like Ray was fantastic because everyone knows who he is. So they're like, oh, we got Ray today, which takes so much pressure off a developing umpire like myself and the other girl I was with. So we're definitely getting those opportunities. Unfortunately, their contracts they have to finish prior to the AFL Grand Final, so we get about 4 weeks out of them, and then our best state league umpires are coming through, and we're the next ones in line. So it's still a high quality of umpire I think that we're putting out there. It's just we're obviously younger and more developing umpires.
Well, it's great to hear that they're doing that. That's absolutely fantastic. And then I for those of you that are listening, again, as I said, I've had Steph on the podcast a couple of times and she plays for Norwood and she decided she would cheekily throw in one question a little bit with my help. So she wanted me to ask you this, Gabby. You're quite a saxophone player. Do you consider yourself a better saxophone player or a better umpire?
Uh, Definitely a better umpire at this time of my life. When I was playing the saxophone every day, I probably would have said the opposite, but haven't picked it up for a little while, so
There's
I'd have to go
nothing
with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. And then I want you to have a little fun here. I want you to go through all of your friendships that you have with AFLW players. Who do you think would be the best umpire that currently plays for the AFLW?
This is a tough one. I don't want to pigeonhole them into thinking they need to have a career in umpiring. Um, I tell you what, Dakota Davidson had me on my toes the other week when I umpired her. So um, she knows where to look, and she knows the rules well. So I think she'd probably be a pretty good umpire. Good presence as well. I don't have a lot of that, but yeah, she'd be a good presence, and I think she'd yeah let you know where you need to be. So
And she can entertain you sometimes with her dancing like she does in the mark. So I'll say
that's
that. All right.
right.
So I had to have a little bit of fun. All right. So we'll pull away from umpiring. I'll let you put your patron hat when you go to the footy, because I've told a lot of people I have never been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. I want to do it. So I'm doing some research whenever I talk with Australians on some of the things that I need to know when I do come. So I have three questions for you. One, when you go to the footy as a patron, what is your go-to food at the footy?
Hot chips for sure. I'm diehard hot chips.
There is
As long as
nothing
they're
wrong
hot.
with that.
As long as they're hot. If you get cold ones, you're just devastated.
Yeah, the hot chips surprisingly has really roared to the top. I there for a while it was almost always it was the meat pie, and hot chips has really gained steam over this last few podcasts for sure. So I'm with you on that one. And then when you go to a game, where is your favorite place to sit? Where do you think is the perfect place to sit to watch a game of footy in the stand?
My favorite is just outside the 50 on the wing, first tier, a few rows back, so you have that little bit of elevation. But at times you can feel like you're almost amongst it at that in that position, particularly at Optus Stadium, which is obviously the stadium that's here in Perth. So
Awesome, awesome. And then my last question that I have, and I always end with this because I can't wait to hear what you say. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen, whether you've watched it on TV, live, even if you've umpired it. What's your favorite game of footy you've ever seen?
um, oh, you can't like this year's grand final was fantastic. There's so many that come across. I guess the final few years ago, West Coast and Collingwood as well with the Dom Sheed goal, that was a ripper. Um, and I reckon just because of the people I was around, probably the elimination final, Fremantle and Geelong down at GMHBA in 2013, I think, when Stephen Hill came off the bench and kicked a goal to get Freo through. Um, Given the people I was watching it with, it was pretty good atmosphere and a great game to be watching. So
Fantastic. I love it. Absolutely love it. Great. In fact, I remember watching that 2018 grand final as an American. I secretly was barracking for Collingwood, though. So, but I was still happy that West Coast Dom Sheed to absolutely slot. That was absolutely fantastic. Still one of my favorite grand finals ever. So that's going to do it for my questions, Gabby. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me, because I'd always wanted to talk with an umpire. And when Steph said that you were an umpire, I wonder if she'd be interested. So for you to take the time to be able to sit down and talk with me has been magnificent. Thank you so much.
no worries at all. Thanks for having us on.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So that is going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Keep an eye out. We've hit the off season. My off season supporter series will be coming very soon. Keep an eye out. I'm planning on chatting with Waffle and Sample supporters. So if you know anybody that supports any of the clubs, unattached, not the AFL clubs, just strictly Waffle and Sample clubs, send them my way. I'd love to be able to make sure I talk with each of the clubs over the off season, and then have a couple of very special guests as well to round out this year. We're going to get back to March when the footy begins in the AFL and some of the women's in the state leagues for sure. So thank you very much for listening. That will be another episode of Donnie's Disposals. We'll be back again very, very soon.